Okay, we're going to talk about the optimization of the game world, basically, right? It's going to be how structures spawn, how the environments are created as of right now in my newest updates to it, right? So I have several visuals I'm going to give you. First, let's look at what we're objectively doing in literal sense, right? We look right here. Here we can see we are doing chunk-based random structure spawning, right? I'll explain what this all means in a second, but basically what it's going to do is going to allow for me to spawn more buildings per chunk. It's going to allow for way better optimization overall, and it's going to allow me to spawn different types of structures per chunk, right? Now let's look at that, what that actually means, right? This is the game world right here. Right here, and this is you. You're the blue free pebble. You start off over here, you emerge from your bunker, and as you can see, the world is split into these different chunks. All these different chunks, right? Now, when we go to spawn structures in the world, right, because there's two types of structures. There's stuff that I can hand place, right? Like if I wanted to make a city, right, and I wanted a very specific alleyway in a very specific spot, right? I could go over and I could hand place those structures by hand, right? And that works well, but we also want a level of randomness to the entire equation to make it unpredictable, right? So we want structures to spawn randomly on top of the existing predefined structures, right? And so what that looks like basically is it's like a little cup, right? There's a little bounding box basically that goes over our whole map, and then it spawns in all these structures randomly spread out throughout the map, just like that. Problem being that these structures are too small and too minute to spread across such a large portion of land, right? I'm gonna give you a little reference, right, just so we can see exactly how big the entire map is, right? I'm gonna just show you. So this is the game world. It's split into 9 chunks, right? And as you can see, there's a little city or something here. There's something over here. There's this thing. There's this block over here, right? But just to show you exactly how small you are, right? Right now, the player doesn't even represent like a single pixel on my screen, right? You gotta zoom in, and zoom in, and zoom in, and now you can see some buildings and stuff, right? Now let's get a scale for this, right? You zoom in, and now that's a doorway. So that's about how tall you would be as a player. You'd be about this size, right? You'd be around there. I'll zoom out and try and hold our mouse right where our player would be, right there. As you can see, very quickly, the map is quite big. It's quite big. So if we were to do something like this, where we only spawn, let's go crazy actually. Let's say we spawn 2,000 structures, so 2,000 little fruity pebbles spread out across this map. The map itself is so huge that doing so places structures all around the map, and it looks fine from a bird's eye view. But upon zooming in closer and closer, structures are way further apart than they should be. These are all hand-placed structures, so I can place them at distances that seem normal, right? That are believable. But if they're randomly placed, and even if there's like 5,000 structures, 10,000 structures, or whatever, it doesn't fill up the map. It doesn't create the level of density that I think is fun to play with, right? Spread them all over the place, making it so a house is like a mile away from another house. It'd be like basically what I want is distance like that, right? And what we have right now is distance from here to here. Like that's how far apart stuff is spawning, right? And then also from an optimization perspective, that's super ineffective. We can't spawn in 1,000 structures or 10,000 structures and then just expect them to be performing, right? Because each structure is its own complex thing. It's a building. It's like a wishing well maybe, or like some stones or cactuses, or basically any environment prop that would get spawned randomly. So how do we do this? We do this by instead shrinking that down and having per chunk spawning, right? So that means instead of having our world cup go over the entire world like this, we shrink the cup itself and make it so it only covers a single chunk. We do that for every single chunk that's here. That way, we can programmatically go in and enable and disable the chunks that we are or are not using. And what does this mean, right? We're going to use these yellow fruity pebbles to represent the chunks that are active at the moment. What that means is that they are enabled within the game world, they are physically active, they have enemies on them, structures on them, the visuals are enabled, everything like that. When a structure is disabled, none of that is the case. It's practically invisible to the game world, and you have no way of knowing that it's there unless you were to then enable it. It also takes up way less memory, reduces performance, or saves a lot on performance, rather. Right? So if you're this player and you're in this position right here, we don't actually need to enable every single chunk on the map. What we can do is we can be smart about it and only enable, let's say, these 3 right here. Because realistically, these are the only spots that you're going to move to as this player, right? There's no point in me turning on the graphics for the robo salvage yard all the way off here in the corner, and all the complex meshes and 3D models and everything, all the enemy behavior for all the way over here if you were right here, right? It just doesn't make sense. So what we can do is we can toggle off all of these dudes and keep these guys on, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But if we have our random spawning system like we mentioned earlier, and we just spawn things like this over top of everything, that makes this a lot harder, because while we can disable the chunks, how do we know when to disable the random buildings? You know, they're spread all across the map like this. How do we know when to do that unless we're going to like go in and do some math for each chunk and determine how far the thing is from the chunk, or, you know, stuff like that. So each one of these chunks will have its own version of this. So that way it can spawn in its own structures and keep all that managed within the actual chunk. So that way when I turn off the chunks, so I turned off all of these ones, right? We only kept on the most immediate ones next to the player. Now all of these are in, and the structures within them are also in. So we have a super dense environment, and it's one that's optimized. Now, one fun thing about this is that I can then go through and change the actual structures that spawn within each of these, right? So instead of having to pick from a pool of random things that was in this big old structure spawner, now we can have hyper-specific ones. So like, let's say for the robo salvage yard, we specifically want to spawn in only red structures, nothing else but red structures in the robo salvage yard. We can do that, you know, and then now they'll only spawn here. Or maybe we want to have this part of the map right here spawn in yellow structures only. So we'll just move them over there. Now this part only spawns in these guys. We can do all sorts of mixing and matching to create different environments and different structures that can spawn in different parts of the world, you know, and this creates a level of recursion to it, because every single time it's going to be random, it's going to be different. However, there are predictable overall patterns that you'll be able to pick up on and use to your advantage. That's the idea. That's the idea for real. Because it's way too big of a game world to just be spawning everything all at once, right? Just to show you the scope of this all, right? This is the one area. This is the desert, right? If you go this way, you go into another version of this, but it's for the forest. If you go this way, right, another version of this, but it's for the winter area, right? I'm not going to tell you about these 2 areas yet, because, you know, gotta let the mind fester a little bit. But you can move in every direction, and there is going to be one of these with its own unique structures, environments, and enemies and loot, and all that. Yeah.